Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be chatting to you again this evening. I'm really super excited to be sharing with you this evening to something that's really close to my heart. It's EcoSchools. For me, teaching children about the environment and community and how we can look after our environments and creating that awareness among children is exceptionally important. So I'm really thrilled to be speaking to Cindy Lee, who is from EcoSchools and is going to be explaining the whole process to us. So Cindy, thank you so much for being part of the chat this evening. I'm really excited to be learning more about EcoSchools.
Thanks for inviting me, Karen. I'm excited to let everybody know about EcoSchools and see how we can all form a huge connection and movement in the country for education for sustainability.
I agree. So can you tell us, where did EcoSchools all begin?
Yeah, so EcoSchools started in the early 1990s, 1994 to be exact. So it was after a United Nations conference that took place, and there was a lot of emphasis being put on education for the environment, education in the environment, and education about the environment. And there's an organization called, or they were called back then, the Foundation for Environmental Education in Europe. So there was a couple of countries where EcoSchools started, and the intention of the program was really to put students and youth at the center of environmental sustainability within their schools, in their communities, and looking at how we can take positive action towards, a better quality of life through learning about the environment, as well as basically like looking at what are the steps that we are taking at school to learn about the environment. For EcoSchools, learning about the environment was just as important as learning about mathematics, learning about science, and literacy. So there was a movement being called "Let Us All Become Environmentally Literate," and so that's where EcoSchools started. And South Africa actually has a very, very important part of the history of EcoSchools. So up until 2003, EcoSchools was only basically operated and implemented in Europe. So it wasn't an international education program. And when WESSA joined, South Africa joined. So also how it works is this organization, the Foundation for Environmental Education in Europe, would reach out to organizations in specific countries, organizations that have a good track record in terms of environmental work, education, and they would then basically ask them to join the EcoSchools program and run the program in that specific country. So WESSA then became the South African partner for the Foundation for Environmental Education in Europe. And immediately when South Africa joined through WESSA, the program became an international program. And that kind of like then gave other countries outside of Europe the opportunity and also the space to join. So South Africa and WESSA has a very important history when it comes to the EcoSchools program because we made it an international one. And also the focus of the program is really looking at what are the kind of skills, what are the kind of competencies that we can gain through engaging with nature. A lot of teachers have told me about respect, So as soon as you start gaining respect for other living beings, that translates in your human relationships as well.
Yes,
and so that is a really, really important connection that teachers have made through the EcoSchools program. And I just want to show a map. Karen, if you can kindly show us that map of distribution of countries across the world, and you can really see it's spread all across the world from just a couple of countries in Europe, and that's thanks to South Africa. So in that kind of like landscape, we've always been an integral part of EcoSchools International in terms of like taking the program, how it was being run in Europe, bringing it to South Africa and actually contextualizing it in the South African context. So immediately there was a case study for the European organization that ran it to say, right, We've designed this program, and now we've given it to a country who've completely reshaped it to what it needs to be for them. So now let's give it to other countries as well. And that's really also the power of the EcoSchools program, is the fact that every country, every school can run it in a way that benefits them. So obviously there's the structures, there's certain guidelines that is kind of like uniform across all the different countries, but you can really like make it your own. And that's for me is one of the gems of the EcoSchools program, even here in South Africa. So the program is run across hundreds of schools in the country, but no school runs it the same way. And that's really important for me. So if you have, for example, a school in the Western Cape, it's important for me for them to focus on what are the kind of like contextual and situational environment that they live in, right? And let's make an example, for example, of fynbos, which is indigenous to the Western Cape. So a lot of our schools in the Western Cape would draw on fynbos as a learning environment, an actual classroom, whereas schools in, let's say, for example, KZN, they've got the African forest around there, using that as a classroom. So it's really about...
Which is so really important that you can contextualize it, because then it really becomes meaningful. I think that's really great in terms of how that's allowed within the program. And the other side is it then encourages creativity and critical thinking and all those kinds of things within the space as well. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, sometimes, teachers are really constrained in terms of like what they have to teach in the classrooms, in terms of, the policies and the frameworks that they have. And sometimes it can be quite daunting to look at other flexible options if you already have so much to do that is prescribed that you have to do. And through the EcoSchools program, we really want to see how do we support what they are already doing in the classroom. So it's not an extracurricular thing where we want teachers to like do something after school. It's really about how do you use the EcoSchools program to enhance the learning journey of learners in the classroom, but also looking at it from both sides. For us at the EcoSchools program, learning is a two-way street. What do I get from the learners? What do the learners get from me as a teacher? And we really use that as a guiding principle in terms of how do we actually like make this program work in a way that both students and teachers feel empowered, and also look at what is my contribution to this. So it's very hands-on, very project-based, learner-centered, learner-driven, some of the big components of the EcoSchools program.
So can you talk to the benefits to communities and schools in terms of EcoSchools?
Yeah, sure. So this is also one of the things that we contextualized from a European context into a South African context. We work very closely with the Department of Education, and the Department of Education have specific requirements that school management, the SMTs, SGBs, and the teachers have to basically like contribute to. And we've sat down with the department and said, like, how do we actually align the program in such a way that helps school tick the boxes of what they are required to do by the department? So one of the big things that the department was struggling with is looking at school environmental management plans, school waste management plans, teacher development and capacity building. And we immediately said, well, that is exactly what the EcoSchools program can offer. The department can offer schools. So immediately there's a nice structure where principals, teachers, learners can actually put together plans that is not just beneficial for the learning and for the engagement of students, but at the same time look at policy development at the school level. So if I can make an example that if waste management is an issue, we can, through the EcoSchools program, actually focus on putting a program together, putting a plan together, and then actually drafting a policy, or what we call a vision for the school. And that becomes the guiding policy that is required by the Department of Education. So that's one aspect of the benefits.
So sorry, so can I just ask, so in terms of that, how do you help teachers to link it to the curriculum? Do you have sessions or workshops, or how do you actually help teachers to get that part right?
Absolutely. So we do have workshops. We have a lot of workshops with teachers, but we've also created a handbook. So each of you'll see as the discussion goes that there is 11 themes that we work under in the EcoSchools program. And each of those themes in the handbook is linked right from grade R all the way to grade 12, is linked to curriculum specific content, topics, subject areas that can be used in the classroom to basically link to the curriculum. So if you go through the handbook, you'll see what grade R's can do through the EcoSchools program in term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4 to enhance the learning in the classroom. And that basically goes right through from grade R all the way to grade 12. So we work very closely with the department and basically look at the curriculum, how it's outlined, week 10, what a teacher's supposed to teach within social sciences. And we basically link active projects that they can do in the EcoSchools program to the work that they are supposed to do in the classroom. So like I said before, Karen, it's really about how do we support, how do we enhance the learning journey of students or learners and teachers in the classroom through the EcoSchools program. So we've got that handbook, we have the workshops. Teachers also call us to do specific themed activities with learners. So for example, climate change can be a daunting topic to talk about. And if you have practical tools and education methods and different teaching methods that we can bring in through the EcoSchools program, it becomes a lot more real in terms of the learning experience. So we try and bring a lot of practical components into the classroom, but also encourage teachers to use their school grounds as a classroom. Use the local nature reserve close to them as a teaching or as a classroom, but also look at how do we set up projects at school that can be used all the way right through from grade R to grade 7, or from grade 8 all the way to grade 12, depending on whether it's a primary school or high school. So that's some of the benefits really that comes through the fact that we focus not extensively, but a large focus of the program is looking at the support that we can give to teachers and learners in the classroom through the program. There is also an element of fun. We believe that if you want to learn something, and that's how we learn at WESSA and at the EcoSchools program, we have to have fun while we're doing it. And we have to be actively involved in it to learn. And so a big component of that is also, that I didn't know that I can plant a tree, take care of it, and 3 years down the line, it's a legacy that I leave behind at the school. Who knows, my brothers and sisters, my cousins, my children's children might come and enjoy this very same tree that I planted today, 20 years later.
That is so lovely. How do you now encourage community involvement? So what are the benefits to community?
Yeah, so that's actually a very important aspect of the program. For us, schools are the heartbeat of communities. So if you're in a community, your child goes to a school, it's a communal asset that the community has. And for us, we've decided that to actually reach the community, we want to start at the school level. So we've realized that individual efforts make collective change. And so through what they learn at school, a big part of that is how do we replicate that in the community? So if you've basically set up a waste management plan or a recycling station, or if you've basically designated an area to what we call bring nature back to school through a biodiversity garden, what are the opportunities for us to take that and replicate it in the community? How do we get your parents involved? How do we get your neighbors involved? If you don't go to the same school as your neighbors' children, how do you bring them in, and how do we extend the program then to the school that they are at? So it's very important for us to get the community involved, because the community is also assets of knowledge. One of the big things that is a theme for us is community and heritage, indigenous knowledge systems.
Oh, that's so exciting.
And who are the people who know best? Our grandfathers, who are at home, our grandmothers, our aunties, our uncles, and how do we get them involved? So a large part of that is also, when they do projects at schools, go and do a little bit of research, at home. See what are the indigenous plants that people used to use for medicine, for food, for rope making, etc. And each province, that's obviously different, but that's how the community gets involved. And then they have to share their projects with their community. So some schools do open days, and actually some of the private schools across the country use the EcoSchools program as leverage to attract parents to bring their students to that specific school, because it creates a platform for learners to kind of further engage and learn skills like problem solving real issues. So if we have water, drought, or whatever challenge they identify, how do we problem solve that? And through a project, through the EcoSchools platform. So that's kind of like how we've set up the project. Communities must get involved for it to be sustainable. And that's an important part of the program. Making your project sustainable through getting your parents involved, getting your community involved, and then seeing what are the kind of ways that we can replicate what we do at school in the community.
I just loved the part where you spoke about getting people to speak about and learn about traditional knowledge. For me, I think that's so important, because we're losing so much knowledge because we're not recording it. There's not a lot of research that's done in higher education around it. And technology used to have a section called Impact and Bias. And there was a whole focus there on indigenous technology. And when I did teacher workshops, I always used to say to them, but what are you doing in your schools? Why are we not recording how traditionally houses were kept cool in summer and warm in winter? What materials were used? What are we learning from that? Like you said, the plants and the animals. So that EcoSchools has picked it up. I am so excited. That is just fantastic, because we need that kind of knowledge, just because it's there, and instead of relearning it, that we can be using that knowledge. So that's really great.
Absolutely.
So I believe you've got a 7 steps program. I think the last time I did EcoSchools, that was one of the first years that you had the 7 steps program. And I remember frantically going around trying to coordinate, because we were a village of schools, so coordinating all the schools and saying, hey, we're going to put all these files together, everybody. So do you want to talk us through your 7 steps?
Yeah, so the 7 steps is really, we brought it in to kind of like give guidance. So we didn't just want to like say to teachers and schools, right, here's the EcoSchools program, now you've got to do projects, which they have to do, but we wanted to guide them through that process. So the EcoSchools 7 steps framework is really a way for them to kind of like tick the box. It's almost like project managing. So the teachers then pass that skill on to the learners to say, right, okay, the first thing we have to do is start an eco committee. And an eco committee is really just a group of students, learners, parents, community members that drive the project at the school. And that's important, because if you just...
Can I go back to what you just said? So
sure.
You mentioned a range of people, teachers, students, parents. So can it be made of anybody within the school? Do you have to have adults, or is it only children? How does that part work?
So it's mostly student-led or learner-led, but it's important to have a teacher, because most of the projects take place on school, on the school property. And so it's just important to have an adult present at whatever the project is they're doing. If they're organizing a little climate march, if they want to set up a recycling station, if they want to, look at water use, energy use at the school, and becoming more environmentally conscious about that. It's about access to information. So if they access to resources, access to information at the school, and then also guidance, So WESSA empowers the learners through workshops, through constant engagement, but we also want them to have a sounding board or constantly. And that's why we try and make the eco committee as diverse as possible. And we also, some schools actually have SGB members, and that is a direct line to resources at the school, So the governing body can then basically put resources into the projects that the eco committee want to run. But at the same time, it's also about whole school development. So it's not just about what the eco committee wants, it's about what are the school needs. And that's where the second step comes in. So we look at an environmental review or an environmental audit, and really that's just a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths, weaknesses, what are the opportunities we have, and what are the threats that we have in terms of our social and environmental, our environment at the school, our teaching and learning environment, our actual living space that we are on this property, on the school property. And that basically then guides them to say, okay, now that we know what our strengths and our weaknesses are, how can we now set up a plan? If one of the weaknesses is there's really no green spaces on schools, they can basically decide we want to tackle that as a project. And you see how the framework then becomes a nice guide, for them. Yes. So it's not just about saying, oh, you're an eco school now, do the projects, but it's really about how do we assist them. And WESSA is not there every single day. So this framework really guides them, the handbook guides them, and there's lots of resources that we share with the school. So this is the way for the learners to understand how to identify and set up a project and how to run it successfully. So problem solving skills, critical thinking skills come in here, teamwork come in here. It's very important to work as a team, but also importantly communication and respect for each other. Everybody's voice needs to be heard in this process for the project to be successful. And then it's really just the process of constantly checking, how is our project doing? If, for example, taking the example of if there's not a lot of green spaces on schools, is there a difference? Is there a change? Is there a transformation on the school grounds? If not, what are the things that we need to do to improve it? And if it is, what are the things that we need to do to actually, further enhance it? Sharing of their story, involving the community, and then ultimately for them to write what we call an eco code, a code that, or a vision, what do they want to strive towards as, Cindy Primary School, becoming an eco school? What are the things that we want to achieve through this program? Some schools do it right at the beginning of the academic year, when they become an eco school or when they start their next level in the program. They say, we want as a school to reach this goal. Some schools do it right at the end, when they've gone through the process and say, okay, now we are reflecting, and through this journey we have learned these things, these skills, and now we want to use this learning process, and that's where we want to go in the next 2 years.
Very nice.
Yeah. So the framework is really just there to assist the schools, to guide them, and give them a sense of there's some sort of structure that they can work in.
That makes sense. You spoke about then that there's these range of themes. So how do the themes then work?
Okay. So the themes are really just kind of broad project ideas. So for example, the community and heritage one is very important for Indigenous knowledge systems. Looking at what are the traditional practices in our community that used to happen. Not just environmentally, but socially, and how did they basically create, this community, our identity, essentially. Fishing communities work so well with that community and heritage, because it's really that connection, the sense of place that creates this community as a fishing community. And so the kids really get stuck into who used to fish, who used to do the bait, And what was the role of the woman, what was the role of the children, what was the role of the men. And there's some schools down in the Southern Cape that really embraced this and actually wrote long history about the role of women in fishing, and they would be what they used to call the forerunners. So the woman would go and see where the fish are biting, and then when the men came home from the plantations, they would say, you need to go to that spot, that's where the fish are biting.
Oh, wow.
But also learning about sustainability. Our fishing community didn't go into the ocean to try and catch as many as we could. It was only what was necessary, and how we can sustain ourselves through also the gardens that they planted. So that's a really nice example of how community and heritage then came together and can be used in the EcoSchools program. And now the kids know that history because they've done the work. So these themes, so these themes are really just kind of like, topics that they can do projects in. It's another way to help them kind of like drive where they want to go, because it can be very, if you just kind of like go in and tell them about the EcoSchools program, it can be very broad, like what project are we going to do? And these themes are really just a way to guide them. Another thing about the themes, Karen, is that the ecotourism one is only in South Africa. So we added that one. So these themes are also international themes. The international, the ecotourism one is not part of the international suite of themes that the other countries does. So that and community and heritage is specifically local to South Africa. And a couple of other countries have now also started doing community and heritage. Mexico is one of the newer countries that have done EcoSchools, and so community and heritage for them was also a big part of the learning journey through the EcoSchools program.
And
so these themes.
I was going to say, and they'll probably pick up ecotourism not too late also, because they also focus on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the nice thing about, us here in South Africa, we've really taken the program apart from how we got it from the Foundation for Environmental Education. And for us, there was no point in running the program here if it's not going to benefit the communities here, the schools here. And so we've spent probably 5 years just designing all of this. We even created our own logo that was in the shape of the current international EcoSchools logo, but we took the South African flag colors and created our own. So that's just ways we kind of like looked at how do we South Africanize this program to make sure it's beneficial to us.
What for you is the best part of the program?
Oh, when the kids make the connection, with nature, with the social aspect of life, with the economical aspect of life, with the political aspect of life. So can I tell you a quick story about, when I came home and I was just like, I love my job. So I was here in Johannesburg. We were at the school, introduced the program. And when I've noticed that whenever you ask learners, what is the most, horrible environmental problem in your community, in the world, all of them say pollution. No matter who you ask, all of them say pollution. Yes. I guess it's understandable because it's something they see every single day. Yes. And so I said to them, well, let's look deeper. Let's just look a little bit deeper about this pollution issue. Is pollution actually the issue, or is pollution a result or a consequence of, maybe like a deeper rooted problem? And I left it with them, and I went back a couple of times and we spoke, and there was this one girl that said to me, actually, Cindy, you know what? I understand now. Because what happens in my community is we don't have a clinic or a hospital. So what happens is a mobile clinic comes in once, maybe twice a week, and then people queue up and line there to stand in the queue. So she said to me, that is a social injustice. We should have a community a clinic or a hospital in our community. Number one, social injustice. Then what happens is, if you look at who goes in queues at the mobile clinic, it's mostly older people. because the younger ones are either at school or at work. And so they go and queue for hours for Disprin, for Panado, for something that they could have gotten at a pharmacy. So number two, it shows the socioeconomics within our community, and that aspect then she started to understand. Standing in that line for 2 hours, people get hungry, and there's like local vendors selling things in little plastic packets, whether it's a vetkoek or a magwinya or popcorn or sweets or whatever it is, they sell it, and in that line, people eat it. What do they do with the packet? They throw it on the ground. So you have these hot spots of pollution wherever the mobile clinic is. Every time the mobile clinic drives away, there's a pollution hotspot. And she immediately put all of those things together and say, this is what is creating our environmental problems. And that for me was like, wow, my job here is done. I can retire now.
That is such a beautiful story. And you've got, yes?
But yeah, that for me is the best part of this program. It's just for them making the connections.
I agree with you completely. And you've brought some amazing pictures along to share with us. Do you want to tell us what we're looking at?
Yeah, so, technology is such a big thing that we cannot leave behind. And this is a photo where through one of our other programs, Young Reporters for the Environment, where they start telling stories about their EcoSchools projects. So they would do a project, they would have the results of the project, and they would make either a short video or write an article or do like a photo essay to basically show the environmental problem, but also how they have solved it. So this picture here is really just looking at using technology to foreground environmental issues in our communities. And the kids love it. They use their cell phones. We bring in tripods and cameras, and they absolutely love it and they enjoy it. But the bigger picture here is for them to tell their own social and environmental stories through their own voices, not through WESSA's, not through mine, but through their own. And so, cleanups, big part of all the schools. And next month, we actually have so many planned because it's International Coastal Cleanup Month. It's also Recycling Month in September. And all of our schools, they want to get their hands dirty. In the beginning, I know some of the kids said to me, yay, we're going to go outside for a cleanup, and it's a period outside of class. But now they understand the value of that. Exactly. Yeah. You can show some of the other pictures. Go for it, Karen.
This is also a cleanup. And these children, what are they looking at here?
So microscopes and magnifying glasses, it's like blows minds, especially if you look at things through them. And so we really want to show them also the fun side of nature, So they would look at each other's eyes, they would look at each other's hands, but then we draw them back and say, now let's look at this plant. Let's actually look at what the tiniest things that make this plant survive, that make this plant grow, looks like. And that just blows their minds, So they would show each other things. Look at that. And this is directly linked to their curriculum. So it's just about what are they supposed to be learning in their social science classes, and how can we bring that to life? What are the resources that we as WESSA can bring to actually make that teaching alive? And that's really what's happening here in these pictures, the magnifying glasses. The tree plantings, I can tell you now, is the most exciting thing. So the kids would gather in groups. They would plant their trees. They would name their trees. They would fight over who's going to water it on which day. And that's really the kind of engagement that you want. But a large part of that is, and this is a community greening that's happening here. So the school did it in their own school, on their own school grounds. And then I think it was like 2 or 3 years down the line, I said to them, well, how do we take this to our community now? And how do we replicate the projects that you do in your school, in your community? They identified a street and they basically greened that street. So you can see the street on the one side, and then they've basically lined that street with trees, but not just trees. They did shrubs, they did speckworm, you know, so it's a variety of different plants that can then grow and form an ecosystem. Yes, this one is also really cool, looking at, you know, water quality, big thing, especially for schools close to rivers. How do you use the skills that you can gain through the EcoSchools program to make sure that your water sources are firstly safe? Because if you get that water from that specific water source, you want to be able to like be sure that it's safe. But at the same time, mathematics. We use mathematics here a lot in terms of like, okay, let's go back to that same spot maybe once a term, and we kind of like track it over the year to see what is the condition, what is the quality of the water. You've probably heard of the mini SAS program, where we look at macro invertebrates, and then basically like do it once a term, and then at the end of the year, let's write a report in terms of like how things have changed, you know. So in term 1, this is what happened. Term 2, this is what happened. And then what are the kind of like factors that influence the results that you got? So if there were no macroinvertebrates, meaning that the quality of the water is really poor, was there maybe a spill close by? Was the river very dirty? What happened? Take your surrounds into consideration when you look at your results. You know, that's just kind of like holistic thinking, bigger picture thinking. And that's exactly what's happening here. So if you can show the next slide. Yeah, so what we're trying to do is, in all the projects that we do, is how do we bring the curriculum in? And the picture with the students with the jug, they were looking at also water quality in a different format. So we have a lot of different partners, and we have these little pH tablets that we basically put into the water. The water changes color, and then the kids can use a kind of like scale through pictures to see, you know, is the water acidic? Is it alkaline? Is it neutral? And then what does that actually mean? If the water is acidic, how does it affect me? How does it affect the environment? If the water is alkaline, how does it affect us? And then obviously, what does it mean for the water to be neutral? And in fact, what is pH even? You know, where does it come from?
Making it really practical. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then this one was water filtration. Oh, they love this one. To see dirty water go in on one side and cleaner water come out on the other side. And this is where we teach about wetlands, the importance of wetlands. Yeah, and how wetlands basically are sponges. So a nice activity that I always do, I always have a sponge with me to show them how nature prevents flooding. If nature is in a good condition, how does it prevent flooding? So I would take like a normal, you know, sponge that you wash the dishes with. I had to have that, and I would slowly start pouring water in. And I would say to them, all right, so let's have a look what's happening with the water. The sponge gets fuller, and then it slowly starts releasing water. Now I take the sponge away and I start throwing water, and water just goes everywhere. And then I say to them, well, that's how wetlands work, you know. So if we have wetlands in our area, it's important for us to protect them, because they protect us when the rains come. And the grades 6 and 7s, they learn about water filtration, wetlands, etc., etc. So we then bring this into the classroom. And the schools that we go to with these kind of activities and these resources are really schools that don't have science labs where they can do these experiments. And so for us, it's really about how do we enhance the curriculum through the EcoSchools program. And yeah, they experiments, the best thing in the world for kids. They absolutely love it.
That's
similar experiments where we look at also, you know, water and what's the word I'm looking for now? What's the word when When you can see like the clarity of water, like when you can see through it or not. And yeah, so we look at different kind of experiments, and how that basically enhances whatever they learn in the classroom. So it's important.
You can just see the excitement in their eyes. It's just so beautiful.
Exactly. So we have a close working relationship with the teachers at our schools, and it's important for us not to just go in and do the programs. It's really about what do each individual school need. And like I said to you in the beginning, the EcoSchools program are run through a variety of schools, but each of them is completely different. And so it's important for us to make sure that that whatever we bring in is exactly what the teacher needs, is exactly what the students need, and is exactly what the school needs. Field studies, taking on so there's the picture on the right with the clipboard, that's in KZN. And so, they've got some of the Afro-montane forest there. Take them out, use it as a classroom. If the school can afford to, let's do a field trip. If they need to learn about a specific curriculum, concept or topic or a specific class, how do you use nature as your living classroom? Nature is the biggest classroom there is. So that's what we encourage them to do. We give them ideas. Sometimes we assist teachers with lesson plans to make it more practical, what to add, how can you spice it up? And then, of course, again, like the microscopes are, it's just a winner. Wherever you go, ever age groups, it's always a winner. Put a plant under there, put an insect under there, and you'll have people staring at that thing for ages. And that's the kind of like connection we want to also create, But the point, and someone asked me once, do you want to turn everybody into greenies? And that's not what we're trying to do here. And I said to that person, it's not about turning anybody into a greening. You can join the EcoSchools program, go and do a successful career in engineering, but you know how to do or how to work with the environment then. Or if you become an engineer, what are the kind of sustainability things that you need to keep in mind as an engineer? And really, the thing about environmental education is not turning everybody into greenies or tree huggers, but it's about understanding our impact, whatever we do on the environment, and also what we can do, whatever in our careers are, to basically make a difference, a positive difference on the quality of life from a environmental and social perspective. So we're not here to turn anybody into greenies, definitely not. But it's for all of us to get an understanding, like Ebenezer did when she put all of those elements together and said, okay, well, this is where this environmental problem is coming from. Yeah.
So I've just so loved listening to you this evening and chatting to you. As we finish off, what is the tip that you would like to leave for teachers around EcoSchools and what you've said in terms of the impact it can have?
First of all, I want to say that it's really not difficult. And teachers already have so many brilliant ideas that can be, taken and molded through the EcoSchools program. We have so many resources that are really there to support teachers to enhance in the classroom learning as well as outside of the classroom learning. And I think we owe it to all of our children. I think we owe it to the grade R that starts. We've got fantastic ECD programs. Like those kids are just wonderful. They just want to plant things. And I think, the important thing for me is that it's important for us to make our green and blue spaces accessible to every child in this country. If we cannot afford to take them to those spaces, how do we bring those spaces to them? How do we give them a holistic education journey that will set them up for the rest of their lives? And the nice thing about the EcoSchools program is that social capital that it brings, knowing your plants around you, knowing your environment, and understanding how that basically supports your everyday life. I was doing some interviews today, and one of the candidates was saying to me, you know, it's so important the work that you do because you teach about things that are real. It's not about learning about snow in America, you know, it's about learning about fynbos here outside your own doorstep, you know, learning about how do you create a vegetable garden that you can harvest from, you know. So it's instead of food security, how do we create food sovereignty in communities? And that's the kind of like things that I feel that this program brings to schools, brings to communities. And it's an absolute passion of mine to take it to as many schools across all the different nooks and areas in our country. And I want the teachers to help me to do that. But at the same time, I also want to help the teachers. I also want to be able to like help them get benefit out of this program through our online courses. And we've got some free ones as well through our workshops. How do you make sure that you as a teacher give your students the best experience? Because I went into the environment because of my grandfather. But at the same time, I was thinking that if I had a teacher that was as passionate about nature at my school than how my grandfather was, I can guarantee you now that probably 50 of my classmates would have also gone into a career in the environment, but also understand their impact on the environment, even if they didn't go in there. So it's about how do we create better futures. It's all about doom and gloom, climate change, the earth is burning, other parts are flooding, and really it's about us making a positive change and showing people that they actually can make a difference. So that's what I want to leave with teachers, with parents as well. If your children are not at an eco school, why not? You know, these are the kind of experiences that they can gain through that program. And so I'm putting a call out to the parents, to the teachers, to the kids watching. Let your eco school become an eco school as well.
Oh, and I second that. Oh, Cindy, I just want to say thank you so much. I've dropped into the chat. There's the brochure for EcoSchools, there's the registration form, and there's also the international school program information. You should be able to grab those off the chat. But Cindy, I really love chatting to you, and I'm really excited to see how the program has just grown and grown. That's really so fantastic. So to everybody who's been watching this evening, thanks so much for your participation. I'm going to end the call. Good night. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks.